Hello and welcome to NONI, Yanga's flagship talk show where we discuss the topics that you, our viewers at home, are talking about just that little bit louder. I'm Afua Adom and today I'll be asking my guests, should parents of bullies be fined? So, who are my guests? Well, joining me today are comedian Mr. C, model and content creator Jacqueline Ulumoka, and journalist and broadcaster Simon London. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
Now, just as schools started to overcome physical bullying on the premises, they now face another problem, cyberbullying. The ability to make a kid's life a misery from beyond the confines of the classroom is quite drastic, and drastic actions require drastic measures. So, should parents of kids who bully be held responsible and fined for their kids' behaviour? After Tony Blair introduced the ASBO anti-social orders for young people who misbehaved, he declared the state had done its bit. But to truly be effective, parents of wayward kids needed to step up, step in and do their bit too. Surely the threat of hitting parents where it hurts in their pockets would encourage this. How many problems would be nipped in the bud if parents were forced to take their duties seriously early on? Would kids about to go out in the evening think twice before dropping litter, committing petty crime, perhaps even carrying a knife? But could fining parents cause more problems? Bullies aren't created out of thin air. In many cases, bullies have abusive parents. Fining them could cause them to become enraged and take it out on their kids. Does this mean the idea is bad, or is the consequence wrong? Perhaps instead of writing a cheque, parents should take classes to become more aware of their own behaviours and give them the skills and knowledge necessary to help them and their children. These skills could help them become more empathetic, show them ways to express both negative and positive emotions in non-destructive ways. Panel, what do we think? Finding parents of those kids who bully. Mr. C. Mr. C has exhaled, therefore you caught my eye.
Well,
Tell me what you think.
no. Number one, definitely not.
Definitely not.
No way, it's
Why?
nonsense. It's
Do you have children?
I have children.
How many can I have?
I have 3.
Right, so if
3
your
sons.
kids were bullying, you're going to get fined a lot.
No, not me. No, I'm not paying it. Number one, it's nonsense because the way I look at it, you have to take responsibility for your own behaviour. And if we start off with children, because children are very smart. Once children know, hold on, if I do this, daddy has to pay.
But don't you think that would be a deterrent?
No, it wouldn't. Not with my children. They'll be out there committing murder. They'll be doing everything. They'll be doing bank robbery, armed robbery, because they know say daddy's going to be paying. So how does a child learn about consequences of their behaviour? Somebody else has to pay.
But the consequence of their behaviour would be their parents having to pay. Isn't that a consequence?
No, that's not a consequence for the person committing the crime or causing the problem. All right, I'll give you a perfect example. Like for me now, at what age does that stop? So now if I do something wrong, should my mum pay a fine for me?
Well, I think it's got to stop where young people are old enough to have their own kind of sense of responsibility. So 16, 18, something like that.
No, because I think a child is a child. They're going to make mistakes, but they need to understand the consequences of their mistakes.
Jacqueline.
I disagree.
Have you got any children?
I don't have children.
Exactly, that's why you're disagreeing.
I don't have children yet, but I do talk about this sort of things.
Well,
and it's funny.
Jackie,
No, but it's funny because I was actually having a similar conversation last week with one of my friends about just certain things about the way I would like bring my children up, and I definitely agree that parents should be fined because it's the parents' responsibility to socialise their child in the right way, discipline their child, and ensure that they're not going out and portraying that parent in a bad way. I feel like your children are an extension of you.
Absolutely.
So if your children are going out doing all sorts of craziness, you can't just say, yeah, of course it is the child's responsibility to check in on their behaviour, but the parent needs to be able to come and enforce it and say, do you know what you're doing is costing me money, and therefore I need to teach you what you need to be doing, how you need to treat people in school. I feel like there's no way parents can just get away with that, because some parents are so nonchalant about it. Like if a teacher calls them up and says your child has done this, they'll just say okay, but you need something to enforce and show your children that no, you can't get away with this.
And Simon, don't you think it's a way of enforcing that kind of awareness like Jacqueline was talking about on parents? Because I've seen parents, I know of parents where they're being told their child is a bully and they're like, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I see both sides of the argument. I've got to come down on one side, and if push came to shove, yeah, I think parents should be fined. But also, I agree with Mr. C says, how do kids find out that their consequences have actions? Well, therefore, it's for the parent then to kind of go, I've been fined, we're selling your Xbox. So I think that, you know, as long as it trickles down and the kids understand that. I mean, here's an example, okay? So I have one kid, he's pretty good. When he was a bit younger, he would sometimes do stuff like say, I'm going round to John's house, and then all of a sudden we'd ring, because we're going out, and we'd ring John's place, and he wouldn't be there. So we would go, so I would say to him, listen.
Did you phone Janet's house?
So I'd say to him, listen, you've got to tell us where you are, because I don't want ever a policeman coming up, knocking on the door and going, your son's been down in South London at Janet's house, and I go, that's not the case, he's at John's house, and the police go, well, you're not a good parent because you don't even know where your kid is. Because I'd say to him, we are good parents, you're making us look bad, and if you make us look bad, then we're going to punish you. So we're doing the best we can, but you've got to help us. It's a two-way street. So yes, I think that I think a lot of the problems that we've got today is parents do not take responsibility for their parental duties, and that includes the action of their kids.
That's it. I mean, I think there's a lot of parents that think because their kids are in school, therefore school will do everything. But bullying is learned behaviour, and that starts in the home.
100%.
Oh, that's steady. I'm not too sure about that.
I agree, but I feel like
when I was a bully at school,
it's not necessarily because your parents are bullies. Sometimes that's just your nature. Like you might be a bad kid.
But that comes up to the nature versus nurture discussion, which is a whole other thing. But I do believe parents need to take more responsibility because, like I said, it starts in the home. It's not just about the state. It's not just about the school. Yes, Tony Blair introduced ASBOs and all the rest of it, but parents have to take some level of responsibility, and it's finding them, not forcing them to do that, forcing them to take that level of responsibility that they perhaps had shied away from before.
I disagree. I think, you know what, who needs to take responsibility? The government, because they're the biggest bullies going. So if we're talking about bullies, let's talk about, when Bush and Blair were bullying other countries, nobody wanted to hold them or their parents to account.
Isn't that a straw man argument though?
No, it's not.
My kid's been bullying.
Slightly reaching its
No, it's not. Because
where did that behaviour start from?
Where did it start?
From childhood.
Not from childhood. That is because there's adult bullies around the world getting away with bullying. Look at Trump. He's a big bully.
Now, don't you think if...
Nobody holds him to account.
Well, that's a different show.
And that's what children learn. Children learn from what they see, and it's not necessarily in their home, it's what society's teaching them as well.
Absolutely, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But don't we think that we need to bring some of the responsibility back into the home environment?
I really, really wonder how many... So we know at the moment there's a knife crime epidemic. Well, there is a problem with knife crime. The media call it an epidemic. But there's a problem with knife crime. I wonder how many kids would be carrying knives if the parents said to them before they're going out, you don't have a knife on you, do you? I want to check in your bag, and if you do, you're going to be grounded, or I'm going to punish you in some way.
Absolutely.
I reckon that there would be a substantial number of knives stopped because the parent has stopped in and done their parental duty. You need a license to have a TV and a license to have a dog, but you don't need a license to have a kid. And I think that, I'm not calling for license for kids, but that is that's the easy thing.
What would be the criteria?
That's a very good point that you're making. I'll pick up on that with some statistics. So violent youth often comes from violent parents. In 2007, over 1.5 million children had a father in prison, and over 147,000 children had a mother in prison. So
See, this is why I don't like statistics when they're bantered around. Just because a parent is in prison doesn't necessarily mean that parent is violent. That parent could have gone to prison for smoking cannabis or selling cannabis, just say, for example, or it could be for a speeding fine. Doesn't necessarily mean that parent is a violent parent. So
absolutely, but these statistics are to do with violent youth and violent parents specifically. Okay. So yes, like you were so rightly said, it does start at home, and we need to enforce the sense of parental responsibility. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I agree, and I think what the main issue for me is how active the parent is, or how involved they are in their children's lives. Kind of similar to what you said about checking in. I feel like a lot of parents I'm going to talk from coming from an African household, sometimes do put the responsibility on the school that my child's gone to school now, done, I can go to work. But it's like, you need to check in, you need to be finding out what your children's up to, you need to know about your children's behaviour, you need to be able to vouch for your child. Like, when someone asks where is your child, you need to be able to say, I know where they are, I know their behaviour. So when things do happen, you're not shocked, like, oh, I thought they were a good kid. Because I feel like a lot of parents coming from an African background don't always spend that time to get to know their kids. Like, not the, oh yeah, I'm reading my books, I'm going to the library, but deep down, who is your child, who is that person? So you know now how to handle it. And I also think, coupled with a fine, there should be training. I know I've read about it before where they've said things like, oh, maybe at the first instance the child might cause a fine, but the second instance it's training. Give them a fine, train them, get the parents involved. Do you know what your children are up to? Do you even know what they're up to online? A lot of this bullying is happening online. People using social media, people using things away from the school, away from when everyone's looking. Get the parents involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't always think it's the parents' fault, because, you know, as you said earlier, that some children are just born bad. You know, like, if I give a biblical example of good parents, Adam and Eve, they created Cain and Abel. One of them killed the other brother.
Yeah.
If Adam or Eve had been fined, that wouldn't have happened. If Adam or Eve had been fined, that wouldn't have happened. By God, perhaps.
What, 2 apples?
I don't know.
That's a good point, though. That is a good point. You know, that you can have kids that are born in the same house, eat the same food, have the same experiences. One's good, one's bad. But at some point, you know, I think it's important that parents step up, and it's very, very easy. I mean, did you ever smack your kids?
I've never smacked my kids. I've beaten them. I've beaten them.
So 2 different.
I've beaten them. However, what I'll say, like my 2 youngest sons are 14 and 16.
Right.
So the last time I probably had to put my hand on my child was probably when they was around about 8 or 9.
So it sounds as though your kids respect you.
Yeah, there's a level of respect.
So where's that come from? Has that come from just the fact that, you know, what's that relationship? That you obviously talk to one another, and there's something going on there.
That relationship is based on, number one, consequences, and at the end of the day, I am your father. I'm the closest thing that you know to God. Yeah, no, because if they haven't got that fear, then they become fearless. Yeah. And that's what's happened with a lot of our, especially our young males. So with my children, I've had to lay down the law, but then over time, this is where you have to make them understand about the consequences of their actions. So the same thing like you're saying, if something happens, you take something away that they enjoy and that they have pleasure or they have value on. And further on, it's about, well, if you, like one of my sons the other day, he got into trouble at school. Yep. He didn't do anything, but his little bad breed friend would tell him, don't move with them people there. They're gonna get you into trouble. I told him. Next thing I know, one of them, they've gone into the school, gone into a room, mash up the keyboard, throw it on the floor. He said, I'm not having anything to do with it. However, like an idiot, he helped them clear it up. So I said, that's it. That's called joint enterprise.
Mr. C, we're going to have to return to this highly emotional story after the break. I know it's a lot, but when we come back, I want to ask, does finding parents disproportionately punish poor people? We'll see you after the break. Welcome back to NONI with me, Afua Adom, and my guests, Mr. C, Jacqueline Ilamoka, and Simon London. So the question we were discussing before the break was, should we fine the parents of kids who bully? And now I want to ask, does fining parents disproportionately punish poor people? And does that matter? Let's face it, if the bully comes from a low-income family, it's not the parents who've committed the offence, but they are the ones who will be asked to stump up the fine. What effect will this have on the family as a whole? And are we creating more problems than we are solving by not dealing directly with the perpetrator? Panel, what are your thoughts? Jacqueline, yes, you pointed.
Why are we talking about only low-income families? I think bullies can come from all sorts of families. Even me, growing up, I've had experiences in school with children who've come from quite wealthy backgrounds who've been bullies. So I don't think it's something we can only really focus on the low income backgrounds and parents who don't have as much money.
But if you don't have as much money and your kids are being fined, then it's going to have more effect on you as a low income family than have an effect on sort of the higher income family.
Oh, okay,
so I think
okay.
that is the problem. That was my main problem sort of supporting it, that here's sort of a hard-working family who are a low-income family, they haven't done anything wrong at all, their kid does something wrong, they have to stump up the cash, and that maybe means their dad has to go and get another job, or mum has to go another job, and then that family unit is broken up.
Or there's less food coming in that particular week.
I mean, yeah.
But isn't that more of an incentive?
Yeah.
Sorry to sound mean,
because then what happens if you've got say like you've got Tashawn and you've got Tarquin, and they're both doing the same thing wrong, Tarquin's family, whatever, it's not going to affect them.
Yeah.
But Tashawn's hard-working family, who are low income, it will have a bigger impact on that family.
So what is the trickle-down consequence of that? Is Tarshan's family going to start taking it out on him, whereas Tarquin's dad just goes, "Oh, boys will be boys," and then I'll just
take it.
I don't know.
I'll take the £50 out of your £2,000 allowance.
Well, this is the thing. What kind of fines
So it should
are we talking about?
Yeah.
How much?
The fine should be according to your income then.
So do you think it should be means tested?
Definitely.
So lower income families perhaps get lower fines, higher income families get higher fines. But then what if the offences, the bullying offences are different? So the child from the lower income family, I don't know, just flushes someone's heads down the toilet, for instance. The child for the higher income family just throws someone pencil, and maybe the offences aren't different, but there's different price points.
Again,
Does
it's
that
sort
make
of
sense?
quite again it becomes difficult, because I think now if you take your kids out of school in term time, you can be fined.
Yep.
And that's not means tested. They just go, it's just a flat
It's a blank
truancy.
Yeah.
If your
It's
child,
£60.
if your child truants, it's the same thing. So I don't understand why we need to. I feel like the issue is parents need to understand how to deal with their children,
Absolutely.
regardless of what income background. It's just you need to sort out your children.
Yeah, but the point, see, this is where again I do believe they should be fined, but this is the complicated thing that if mum and dad haven't done that bullying, see if they take their kids out of school, mum and dad are directly involved in the bad behaviour.
Yes.
So them being fined seems fair, but if who was it, Tarshan or Tarquin? If both of them have gone and done like your boy, you say he was innocent, we'll see when the court case comes out. But if they've gone into the classroom and smashed it up, then and the parents are fined, they're sort of not responsible.
But they are
fined when their
responsible.
children truant and don't attend school. It's the same thing.
Well, no, that's
I
a good
just
point.
need to lie down.
Because in the incidents of my
Same
son,
thing.
because there was damage done to the keyboard, what the school has decided is that the 5 boys involved all have to pay for the new keyboard.
Yeah.
However, what I'm saying is my son never brought nothing. Yeah. So the 2 bad breed kids who did break it, they're the ones who need to pay, because otherwise they're thinking, oh well, this is easy, because now instead of me having to pay for my consequences of my action, I'm sharing this with other people who weren't involved.
But isn't your son culpable in
Because he
He
was
was
there.
there and he's
there.
friends
No,
with them
well,
and he's joining them.
No. My son didn't do anything. But what my son needs to understand is that that's the consequence of moving with the wrong people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if that was outside of school, you could end up in prison because of it.
So what's
that's
happening
That's what I have to teach my son.
So is he going to pay?
He's not going to pay.
Because you've said so.
Because I've said so, and I'm not going to pay.
So what's the consequence for your son then?
How's he going to learn?
The consequence for my son is that the school would have to do something to me. So they're going to try and fine me, but they'd have to find me first. I'm not paying it.
So it does sound as though your son has been in with a crowd that's done something wrong.
Yeah.
You're not going to punish him.
No,
You're not gonna
I am going to punish him, definitely.
So you're going to say to the school,
I will
leave
punish
this
him.
with me.
Yeah, I'm going to punish him. Yeah,
What's
and
his name? Run!
Ellis.
Ellis, run!
See what you've done.
You're going to get punished.
You're going to get punished. He knows it.
Say
He
this-
knows it.
say this was someone else and they weren't going to punish their child. How would their child learn the consequence of chilling and hanging out with
The
bad
wrong
children
crowd.
Well,
and bad crowd?
what will happen in prison? Prison will teach them that.
It's a bit
Don't-
drastic.
but
But shouldn't
Start
but
from
maybe
early.
and it doesn't need to get
Start
to
from
that
early.
point. This is what we're saying. If
Well,
you
you-
start from now,
I-
finding parents will enforce them put in that level of discipline that kids don't have to end up in prison.
I tell you what's gone wrong. Yeah, see, in my days, yeah, when I was a bully or I did a bit of bullying at school, yeah, and it went too far, you know what somebody did to correct my behaviour? They punched me in the mouth. Yeah, it's a consequence. It's very simple.
Do you think when you were a bully, do you think if the school said to your parents, we're going to fine you X amount of money because your son's done this, this and that, would that have stopped you from doing what you did?
That would have stopped my life.
So it would have stopped you from doing what you did?
That would have stopped my life. And my mum still wouldn't have paid it, but my mum would have. But the thing is, children expressing themselves through either calling people names or whatever. There's different levels of bullying. And this is what we need to clarify first and foremost. There's different levels of bullying, but that's children finding their way through life. And being on either the giving side of it or the receiving side of it, that's how we learn.
But don't you think there's
life.
different ways for children to express themselves without bullying others? There is, 100%.
Yeah, it's not acceptable.
What might be quite interesting though is I was a really bad bully at school.
Ooh, it's all coming out.
Long story, which it was a kind of minor public school. Pretty much everybody there was white, and when they all called me names, I would start fighting. And so my dad was called down, and the teacher said, he's just got to learn to accept it. So my dad just said, anybody calls your name, just hit them, and hit anybody who laughs. And then when a bully walks in and says something and nobody laughs, you've taken away their power.
Exactly.
It probably wasn't the greatest thing to say. However, it worked for me. But what would have been better is if they'd have said, right, we're calling in your dad and we're fining you, and we'd all had to sit round a table and the school would have had to deal with the issues that were... So maybe this kind of... Because I don't think they would just go, right, you're being fined. They would come in, they would listen to it, and the school would have to approach bullying that goes on at school in a different way. And before you got to the fining bit, you might be able to go, well, wait a minute, this kid did this or this kid said that. Let's approach the whole idea of how we deal with bullying in a different way. So it sounds as though, do we find the kids just seems like a knee-jerk reaction? If we look at the steps that we get to before we do that, I think then it would be a positive thing.
And not all terms of bullying should receive a fine. There's some things where, you know, that you're going to have that name calling thing. That's part of growing up, where you realise that, you know what, over time, you know, probably what I've done, that's not too... I remember there was a kid who we used to bully, a kid who was 2 years younger than us, who we used to bully. On the way to going home from school, he would always follow us. And we'd bully him, we'd tease him, blah, 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 continuously, always run joke on him, blah, 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 take off his jacket and put it on top of a tree, and just nothing physical. And I'll tell you what, because he was a lot shorter than us, I remember around about 6 years after school, I saw this guy call me by my name, and I was like, who's this guy? He was like towering over me. And I remembered him, and I was like, oh my God, this is the youth we used to bully. He was like 6'4", built, and I, as a grown man now, I started shaking because I was thinking, Lord Jesus, if you remember what we used to do to him at school. But he was like, oh, see, yeah, man, we had great times at school and blah, 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 and we had great fun. It was fun to him. But...
Really?
No, but to me, it made me think about what I was doing to him. And I thought, you know what? Nah.
I think what I was going to say is I feel like it's easy to say that after, because now you can sit and think about it. But during the time, I'm sure the boys didn't appreciate what was going on. But
it's different.
My own personal experience, I feel like there has to be some sort of deterrent. So I remember there was one time I was in primary school and someone had been like teasing a boy, and I started laughing, and he came over and he hit me. And the first thing I said was, I'm going to go and tell the teacher. And he literally started shaking and was like, no, because they're going to call my dad and my dad will beat me.
Oh, wow.
So in my head, I was like, oh, okay, so you know that you getting in trouble is going to cause your dad to beat you. Why are you doing it? And he was like, I'm so sorry. He started begging me and was like, I literally don't want my dad to beat me. So whether it's a beating, whether it's a fine, there needs to be something that's going to stop
that bloke lives in a cellar now and does all the errands.
I'll never forget, the boy literally started crying. He was like, a year year above me literally started crying. I told my dad anyway. And my dad came into the school, had a word, so I know his mum beat him. But it was a situation where...
You're evil.
No, why hit me for?
No, hold on,
It's
because
true.
didn't you say that he was getting bullied and you was laughing at him?
The thing is, I remember someone
You
called him
was
a name.
laughing. You was laughing at the victim.
Fair enough, but you don't hit me. Why hit me?
She was
No,
the one
I laughed.
calling it.
You laughed and
I
then you
laughed.
got beaten.
Yeah, but
You're like a double. No, find her mum and dad.
You know what? You're right.
The thing
You
is,
was peddling.
No, I wouldn't say he was getting bullied, but I just remember the situation. Someone said something to him. He laughed. But I just feel like, why use violence? Like, if you want to talk.
Yeah.
He literally came
But
over
you
to me and
advocate
hit me. I would
violence,
never
though.
forget it. He hit me on my head, and I was like, what's going on here?
I think that what we were saying earlier about different gradients of bullying is true in the sense of there's a bit of name calling and everything else. At my school, it was kind of the racism that wasn't being tackled,
Addressed
so
properly.
that's how I got into that. I think grabbing the kid and chucking his jacket up and everything else, that's kind of sort of that fine line between joshing
And
and
bullying.
bullying.
But I think,
and
like
what
you-
sorry, go on.
So, like you said, if there's a racial element when it's name calling, yeah, there's gradients to
Yeah.
bullying, definitely. And so things like that, I think there should be a fine for. Definitely, maybe joshing not so much, but like you said, there is gradients to the bullying, and that could bring ingredients to the fines. Don't you think?
And
so?
the one thing you said right at the very beginning was this kind of thing of cyberbullying. And so I think that actually we're probably, us two old men, you being young, but us two old men are going, oh, back in the 70s when it was a bit of this, a bit of that. Cyberbullying I have no sort of knowledge of at all. And actually getting the parents involved, getting them down there, as you said, teaching them about how this all works.
How it works, how to monitor what your kids are doing.
Exactly.
It's a really good subject that you've chosen because I think it's both. I can see the positives, I can see the negatives, but if you kind of were to ask me to come down on one side, I would slightly veer on the fine 'em.
It's a difficult one, but guys, thank you so much. That's it from me, Afua Adom, and my fantastic guests, Mr. C, Jacqueline Ulamoka, and Simon London. Thank you so much for joining me, and don't forget, every episode of NONI, past and present, is online at yangatv.com. So wherever you are in the world, you can see this show and other great content from Yanga. Join us again soon for more entertaining chat. Goodbye.